Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Should You Buy It, the video series where I talk about niche gear, maybe the less common RuneScape gear. I'll give you my opinion on it, and you can decide on your own if you want to purchase it or not. This is the most frequent and consistent YouTube series on the platform. That is undisputed. But if you haven't seen these before, welcome. I have a whole playlist, check it out if you want. On today's episode, we're talking about the lesser rings. These guys right over here. Maybe you have some of your own, maybe you haven't purchased some of them. Regardless, we're going to talk about them because they definitely still have use in the game. So, let's just hop right into it. As I'm sure you guys are aware, those 4 new rings came out with Desert Treasure 2, and they're really good. You definitely want to buy most of those. Because they're good, it just has pushed everything else down a little bit more because of power creep. For the rings that we are talking about today, I'm going to be putting them into 3 different categories to make it nice and simple. The worthless category, the case can be made category, and the niche, but actually good sometimes category. And again, I just want to say this is my opinion, so you can definitely fight me in the comments if you want to, because I openly encourage some active discussions. So let's start it off in the worthless category, what I don't think is really good, the ones that you probably don't want to buy almost no matter what. I want to say with all the rings in the worthless tier, if you're like low level, balling on a super budget, maybe 1 or 2 of these rings will have a home for like a small window in your account, but it's almost like these are better than nothing. If you have nothing else, I guess you get this. Let's start things off, we have the granite ring. It is a defensive ring, and it's not a very good one either. There is definitely a better option for defense if you want something in your ring slot. And the ring slot is pretty important. You don't want that to just go strictly to defense. There is a better option with the Ring of Suffering too. The Ring of Suffering is more than just the defensive pick anyway, so it's not exactly comparable. As far as the granite ring goes, there's just kind of no reason to ever take it. But that brings us to our second ring in the worthless tier. We're talking about the warrior ring. It is a slash accuracy ring. So it is a melee specific ring. You'll find that any melee specific ring is pretty much outclassed by the berserker ring. It just really doesn't do that much. It can be second pick for a lot of wiki options, but just because there's nothing else to bring really if you don't have a berserker ring. And our last ring in the worthless tier is the seers ring. This ring's bonus is a magic accuracy increase. You'll find that in RuneScape, magic accuracy really doesn't do all that much. Magic strength is pretty much where it's at for what you want to get. As a quick example, say we're killing Thermi, we're using magic, we're just chilling. The Seers ring versus the Ring of Suffering here. Almost no difference, as you'll see. The accuracy is very slightly better for the Seers ring, but you're going to get way more value out of the Ring of Suffering in this situation. Most of the time when you're taking magic at a boss, you will find that a different ring is going to provide more value than just a little bit of extra accuracy. Moving on to the next category, we have a case can be made. And first up is the treasonous ring. Once again, we have ourselves a melee ring here, but this one is for stab accuracy. Once again, the strength bonus on a berserker ring is just going to outclass this, in almost every situation. When talking about this ring, a lot of people like to point to King Black Dragon in the Wilderness because it's such a low risk ring to bring in there, so you don't have to really worry about risking too much. I do see that as a reason to have it, that's why I feel like a case can be made for it. It is pretty close to being in the worthless tier in my opinion, but I can still see it. Another thought I had is using it as an Arclight spec ring swap. If you're doing Corporal Beast and you're specking with an Arclight, this ring might be a good swap for you. A little bit of extra accuracy on that spec might go a long way. Yeah, that's about all I got for this ring. There's a reason the price is so low on it. Moving on, we have the Archer's ring. This used to be the best in slot range ring in the game until very recently when the new ones came out. Despite that, it's only an accuracy bonus on it. It doesn't provide any strength for range. Personally, I've definitely overvalued this item in the past. I kind of come to the realization that in most PvE situations, a little bit of accuracy doesn't provide as much value as you think it would. In certain situations, you might just not bring a ring swap for range if you're using multiple combat styles, or you might want to save up some prayer bonus with one of the other rings we'll talk about later, Ring of the Gods, spoilers. So it's definitely not a bad ring, but I feel like there's better picks in most situations where you could consider it. And finally, in the case can be made tier, we have the Brimstone ring. So the Brimstone ring provides a little bit of bonus for everything. It's an offensive ring, defensive, it has a passive on it. If you ever use this ring, it's definitely not for the passive. You take it because it covers all your combat styles, and it lets you worry about one less switch. If you just plug it in, you know it's going to be good no matter what you're doing. Personally, I don't really use the Brimstone ring. I don't mind switching, I'm a little more experienced. So I feel like it's a good learner tool for new players that aren't as good with juggling their inventory and just figuring out what's best to put on when. You could just pick this ring up because it's good value for what it is. You know, it covers all your bases for combat styles, and it's not terribly expensive. So while you're still saving up for those better rings, this can kind of fill the void in the meantime. And moving on to our final category, we have niche, but actually good sometimes. First one up, we have the Tyrannical ring. So this ring provides a crush accuracy bonus for melee. This isn't a ring you want to just throw on and forget about it. This is something you bring as a swap when you're trying to Dragon Warhammer spec something. Gives you a little bit higher chance to hit, and it does come in handy when you can spare the inventory slot for it. You know, maybe you're tanking a God Wars dungeon, or you're just doing corp. I hold on to it, I get my use out of it. I think it could be worth the purchase depending on where you are with your account and what specific activities you're doing. Trust me when I say this, you will be Dragon Warhammer speccing some stuff, and you will find a time to pull this out of the bank. And following that act, we have the Ring of Suffering. I feel like everyone has an understanding that this ring is pretty good. You know, it is the definitive tank ring. You know, it has some prayer bonus on it. It has the Ring of Recoil effect for a little bit extra damage. Super useful for Zulrah. Really is worth the purchase. You know, I bought mine long ago and I just never got rid of it. It's just always been with me. And every now and then I pull it out for something. I promise you, it's okay to have this even if you're not going to do Zulrah. And finally, we have ourselves the Ring of the Gods. So this ring is actually best in slot for prayer bonus in your ring slot. What I really like about this ring is that you will feel this +8 prayer bonus way more than you feel like a +8 accuracy bonus. I feel like this ring choice really will come down to player preference more than anything. You are going to lose some DPS using this over like a more offensive ring, but you can still get a lot of value out of it. You can still make it worth it. A lot of people like to point to Hydra for using it. I think you can make a very strong case for Dagonoth Kings, somewhere where you want to stay a really long time without rebanking. Maybe you're going to be losing prayer a lot, so you just really want to conserve that bonus. Even if you're skilling, trying to keep your prayer up while you have preserve going, fight caves. You got to think where you're going to be sitting at for a long time. You don't want to rebank. For just doing Slayer, that's a big goal for a lot of people, is to just sit in the task for as long as you can without having to rebank or something. Let's talk about Zilyana down in God Wars Dungeon, because I feel like there's a compelling argument to be made here for Ring of the Gods. I'd say typically when you go down there, you do bring a Ring of Suffering, but maybe you're a little more experienced, you know, maybe you don't need the defense from Ring of Suffering. Ring of the Gods looks a little bit better then, because it has that plus prayer bonus over the Ring of Suffering. I've also compared it to the Archer's Ring, you know, a more offensive pick. While the Archer's Ring is a little bit better, you know, it provides like a 2.5% damage increase in these situations. It's not that much. I feel like the prayer bonus on Ring of the Gods is going to be better thinking about God Wars Dungeon. You don't want to bank and run back, waste an ecumenical key. You want to stay down there as long as possible. I already did say it before, but player preference is definitely the key word here, the key phrase. It comes down to what you think you'll be doing, how well you'll perform, what specifically your goals are at each individual location. But Ring of the Gods, definitely not bad. And with that, we're going to end the episode of Should You Buy the Lesser Rings. I want to reiterate that the Desert Treasure 2 rings are definitely better than most of what we talked about in any given situation. It's just, you can't always afford those things, you know, they're far away in the distance. But I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions about rings, or RuneScape in general, feel free to ask me. I'm still not sure if I'm back with YouTube videos and content creation, but I just kind of had some motivation lately, so here we are. I'm sorry to tease you like this if you're hoping for a dramatic comeback. I can't label it as such yet. Anyway, if you guys have any opinions on these rings you want to let me know, definitely do so down in the comments. I think these videos are good as like a big encyclopedia of community knowledge, so definitely add to it if you have anything that is noteworthy that I might have glossed over. But yeah, have a good day guys. I will see you in the next one, whenever that happens. Peace!